Do you want to learn the secrets of trading? The truth is, too many investors know the struggles of trading. Now let's find out what worked and what didn't with their personality, as these successful investors share their trading journey with us.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of A Trader's Journey. I am your host, Ryan Faluna, and I am here with expert trader Roland Wolf. Roland, how you doing today?
What's up, Ryan? Doing well. How are you, man?
I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. I'm really excited about hearing your story, so let's go ahead and just dive right in. My first question here for you is, how did you get started in trading? Was this something that you were into at a young age, or did this come about as you were aging?
No, you know what? It was something like in high school. I remember seeing Wall Street, kind of like the glitz and glam of that kind of environment and the money that was being made and all of that, and being kind of interested, but not really. Like, it was never an idea to trade stocks or do anything like that for a profession. I was actually playing soccer growing up. That was, my main goal in life was to actually play soccer. So this was never on the agenda. Kind of stumbled upon it, you could say. But yeah, so I was playing soccer, played in college. I left college early to play in South America and Europe. I was actually in Europe in my early mid 20s, so about 24 years old. Had a really bad injury in Croatia, and then I ended up moving back to the States. And no degree, no real idea what to do with my life. Ended up getting married, had 2 kids. And it was actually when my wife was pregnant with her second kid that I kind of stumbled upon trading. So it's kind of crazy like that.
That is a pretty crazy story. I got to ask, what position did you play in soccer?
I was a forward.
All right. Awesome. Awesome. Good stuff. I've never been able to play soccer, but I do enjoy watching it. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
So on this journey, after you stumbled across it, how long would you say did it take for you to become profitable? What skill or skills would you say helped you achieve consistency?
Yeah, I'd say from the second I stumbled upon it, about a year or so before I got some real consistent profitability, to the point where I thought maybe it won't be a part-time gig. Maybe this can be something a little bit more permanent. And like I said, when I started trading, it was actually to supplement my income. I was thinking it might be a good side gig because I was planning on going to law school. Which I didn't like the idea of, obviously, coming from playing soccer to sitting behind a desk, just like really made me, I did not want to do it, in other words. So oddly enough, I had my second kid. My wife was pregnant with our second child. So I took a little bit of cash. We didn't have too much at the time, $800 or so, and put it into Barrett Gold. Now, this was in 2015, I think, end of 2015. And it doubled over the span of 6 or 7 months. And so that was actually the first time where my eyes were open to the fact that this is something you can do. And then to me, it was like, okay, but how can I get that kind of return faster? And that is actually what ultimately led me to day trading, small cap in particular. So it's kind of crazy like that. So I got into it just to kind of have a side income. And then it turned into a full-time gig, it still blows my mind to this day.
Yeah, that I can totally relate to that, because for me, it also was kind of like a side thing. And then that passion thing took over. And then all of a sudden, that's what I wanted to do full time. So I completely empathize. I totally understand.
You got bit by the bug.
Yep, it's exactly. We're not the only ones either. So
Nope.
Can you tell us about a time that you struggled in your trading, and how did you end up getting out of that rut?
God, you know what? I think anyone who says that they don't struggle all the time is kind of full of it, because trading is really hard, especially if you're trading like volatile, small cap, or just anything volatile. We've had a lot of volatility in large cap stocks throughout the year. So, I mean, for me, I can't tell you, like, outside of the initial learning curve, like trying to figure out how to trade, I get in ruts all the time, and it may just be 3 or 4 trades in a row, maybe 1 or 2 days. And one of the keys for me is stopping that bleeding. And one of the things I've been really good at is identifying when that's occurring and then why it's occurring Is it because I'm using the wrong strategy in the wrong market? Maybe the patterns or the strategies I was using last week stopped working. Am I still aggressively pursuing things that aren't working? And that is something I've always been really good at. So when I get into a rut, to me, it's not so much about now there are times if I'm taking big losses for no reason, or I'm psychologically messed up for some reason, or I'm sick, or there's some other outside factor that's really, weighing in on my trading. There are times where I step away. But if it's just, a part of process breaking down or markets changing or something like that, and me not adapting appropriately, I've been really good at identifying where the breakdown is, fixing that, and just continuing to kind of grind away on a daily basis, because I always like to think, yeah, maybe the patterns are gone or I'm doing something wrong, but as long as I can fix it quickly, I can keep on trading. And the next opportunity for that pattern or whatever I'm looking for may be just around the corner. So I try not to, a lot of people get really down and they want to take a bunch of time off, but I find that maybe 10 minutes from now, things will change as long as I'm actively changing myself and making sure that, I'm intact. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And that's a really good point. I think the first step of fixing any problem is identifying what the problem is. So that, to me, that makes a lot of sense. And you're right. Volatility can create tremendous gains. Volatility can also create tremendous stress. And it's how you deal with that turns you into a successful trader. It's a really good answer.
It's been a stressful year.
Indeed, it has.
There's been it's been too volatile to the point where I remember in June, July, I was hoping things would just slow down for a week or two. Granted, they did slow down. So we got actually a couple months, especially in small cap, where things got slower. But it's been hectic. It's been a hectic year.
Indeed, it has. 2020 is not like many other years out there. So
not like any year I've lived on this earth. So
yeah, me either. What do you think is the secret to success in trading?
Gosh, hardest question ever, because there's not one secret, I don't think. For me, the secret to success, it's a plethora of things, and then all of these things converging at once over the span of time. So for example, screen time, that's something that cannot be replaced. You know what I mean? I can teach, or anyone can try to show you all of the things in the world, all the technical analysis and fundamental analysis. But until you've seen it firsthand hundreds of thousands of times, it just doesn't sink in properly. So, in terms of the secret to trading, there's not one secret. It's screen time, process, the markets, your skill levels, your knowledge, your patterns, all of that converging. And I like to tell people that, a lot of people think you can just come in and make money. Now, at some times that's the case, but it's not going to be. If you want to do it long term, it's a totally different story. But for people who haven't gotten profitable yet, to get to that profitability, a lot of times it's just a convergence of a bunch of different things at once. A little bit of luck to get you started and getting that exponential growth in your account going. For me, that happened in 2017. Mm-hmm. And what I was doing was taking advantage of sector momentum, which I've been doing a lot of this year. That has been kind of key to me. But in terms of the secret, there's not one secret. There just isn't. It's just so many different things all put together, and then it's different for every single person. And that's not even talking about psychology and learning how to read price action and all of that good stuff. So I'd say the secret if you're beginning is patience. Understand it's a really long-term game to get all the experience and knowledge that you need to consistently profit. Not every day. I don't profit every day, but over a long span of time.
And so you'd already talked about this a little bit, but I'd like to kind of expand on it. Tell us a little bit about how your trading has gone under the current market environment and COVID. How has that affected things?
Yeah, so it's weird because 18, 19 were kind of slow in terms of small cap. If this is the first year you've traded, you've been spoiled with volatility. Whereas 19 and 18, we had really slow small cap markets. Yeah, we had a bull market overall, but small cap was not the most volatile. You kind of had pockets of volatility. This year, basically from the time COVID hit through, I'd say August, the beginning of August, it was the hottest I've ever seen a market. so many different sectors running. And because of that, I was able to do really, really well the first half of this year in particular. Sector momentum, it's in terms of like, you guys will remember all the stocks that said there were COVID. NVAX went into the hunt to $200. NVAX was a stock that prior to COVID, anytime news came out, was ultimately going to be a short at some point. Probably still is now. Who's to say? But yeah, so it's provided so much opportunity, so much volatility, and it's been really fun trading. Really, really fun trading. But it's also been really different. A lot more liquidity. Algos that's something that's, I think, in my opinion, is relatively new to the small cap markets. A lot of different things going on that's taken some adjusting for sure.
Yeah, and I think that lends itself to something you said earlier when you were talking about having to change with market conditions. I think that's absolutely a skill, and I think that happens all of the time. And if you're not ready to make that change, it could absolutely hurt you. That's a great answer. Now, if you could go back to day one of trading, what would you tell yourself?
Oh, don't chase, obviously. And it's funny because you hear people say don't chase, but what does that mean? Like, even for me, the definition of chasing itself changes like throughout as I've gotten more and more experience. Depending on the price level, is it 10, is it 20, is it 30 cents? That's a chase. To me, risk reward is something that I didn't focus on early on and I didn't understand. And I'm still actually kind of developing that as well. I think we always kind of are developing that risk reward that makes sense. But if I could go back, I would tell myself risk reward. If you can't define it, going into any given trade, probably not a great trade. There are times now where I'm trading momentum where it gets a little bit gray area risk reward wise, but almost all my best trades, it's super defined. It makes cutting easier. And outside of that, I would say patience. Just stick around long enough, which I did anyways, because I was always good at cutting losses. But stick around long enough to be able to let all of these different factors converge and experience that success, however long that may take.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think the whole idea that when you're talking about risk, I think that's really important. That's different for each trader, right? So my risk profile is going to be different than your risk profile. And I think that's something that a trader needs to discover on their own. I think that actually lends itself to consistency. That's really good advice.
That's yeah.
Over the course,
just to speak to that point, really, because I think it's really important. Especially like FinTwit and social media can be super toxic for a beginning trader. I think there's some decent info out there, but there's really not much that you're missing out from not checking social media in terms of like your trading ability. Even I get caught up sometimes in seeing some of my peers with like really big gains and feeling inadequate at times. Like, damn, maybe I even played the same play. Just like the size wasn't there, whatever it is. And everyone does have their own risk tolerance. Like for me, for example, I've got 3 young ones, a mortgage, I've got the wife, I've got a lot of responsibilities outside of just myself. A lot of the traders I know are kind of young single men who can afford, in some cases, to risk more. For me, all of my trading is based around the fact that I can't risk it. I can't risk a large proportion of any of my accounts. Well, not any of my accounts, smaller ones are fine, but my capital on any given trade. That's what a lot of, so for me, I keep that into perspective. I have my own situation. I have my own risk tolerances. My goal is to be able to increase that risk tolerance for sure. And I've been successfully doing it, but over time. So don't compete with anyone. You don't have to compete with anyone. It's you versus you. It's kind of you versus the world. And it's just, what can you take out of the market each day? And it's going to be different. For me, it's different all the time. But over time, it changes. You know what I mean? So that's what's beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. I tell people that only compare yourself to yourself. Don't compare yourself to other people. I think that's really smart advice. And that answer actually dovetails nicely into the next question here. How has the experience of sizing up and taking more risk gone for you? You kind of touched on it a little bit already, but dive in a little bit deeper there for me.
It's been good. I kind of have been plateaued for a while, I'd say. But for me, I get this question all the time, like, how do you size up? How do you size up? A lot of people think it's like you just go from one size to another, to a bigger size, and like that's just how it works. When it really isn't. And when people ask that, it's probably because they've tried to size up, they take a big loss, and then they're like, crap, they size back down. Okay, that's generally the pattern. It's like, and it happened to me when I was trying to initially size up. I guess the thing I didn't understand was it's not just sizing up. It's when are you sizing up? Why are you sizing up? What's your risk if you size up to a certain amount? What is that risk going to be? And can you handle that risk psychologically once you get in the trade? Or are you going to panic out, well, without respecting your risk because you're in too much overhead, all of those sorts of things. So for me, sizing up is relatively easy because I realize risk reward wise, when my patterns are there, when the market's there, and I'm really on my game and I know exactly what I'm doing and I have a high conviction situation, that is when I work on sizing up, because I'm also willing in that situation, knowing it's one of my best setups going into a perfect day and the action is lining up, that is the time. And then if it doesn't work, then the pattern didn't work and so be it. It's not because I sized up, as long as I stick to my trading plan. So for me, I mean, I continue to do that. I continue to push my envelope when my setups come and when the markets come. So like in June, March, April, May, June, I was really pushing my envelope. And it paid out really nicely. Yes, I took some bigger losses too, but that was the whole point of it, The second things cooled down, I brought my size way back down. I think it's super important not to just like want to attain a certain size that you're trading as stock size all the time. Of course, my stock size, because there is a stock size for me when it's a subpart setup in a slow market and I'm just grinding out singles, that size has of course gotten bigger over time with my account size. So it kind of has to be a natural progression, but I will say it's not just size up any old pattern any old time. It has to be the right circumstances.
Absolutely. And so it sounds like you got a lot of that from lessons that you've learned across your trading career. So my next question is, what lesson or lessons have you learned along the way? What other lessons have you learned from going through all this?
Oh God. The cause and effect of fundamentals and how they move stocks in small cap in particular, of course, any stock.
I like that a lot.
But particularly with micro cap and small cap, the dilution, like understanding that process and, share structure and how that will impact it when volume comes in. A lot of things early on that would have been kind of not easy answers, but quicker answers to what I was ultimately looking for than just having to watch, decipher patterns and figure all this stuff out,
Awesome. So what would you say your best strength is when it comes to trading?
Pattern recognition. I'd say a couple, and it's a combination, but pattern recognition. From the beginning, I've always been pretty good with pattern recognition. So I see something, the second time I see it happening, or third time, I've already kind of put it in the knowledge bank, I guess you could say. So I've been good with that and adaptability, and I think they go together, recognizing the end of patterns and the beginnings of new patterns. I think my largest strength has been a pattern combination of that, discipline in terms of cutting losses and sticking to process, and I'd say those two in particular would be my strongest suits.
Okay, now I can't ask you about strengths without also asking you about weaknesses. So have you been able to identify your biggest weakness? And as a follow-up, have you corrected that?
Biggest weakness. My biggest weakness in terms of on the daily has been the inability to size up, if that makes sense. I'd say that may be my biggest weakness. Like the size I take, a lot of people would really love to have that kind of size. But in my eyes, there is another tier that I want to get to eventually. And that's what I'm working towards. And it has been a weakness. Maybe it's because of kind of my situation with children and all that stuff always in my head. It's something I'll work on, but I'd say that right now is the thing I'm working on the most. That's been giving me a little bit of struggle, and I'm always pulling the size back in. So we'll see. When the market's right, you may see something different from me.
Makes a lot of sense. And you have to identify those problems as they come. So Roland, I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for joining us today. I appreciate all of the time, and I hope that our viewers, you'll join us next time for A Trader's Journey.
Hey, thanks for having me.